you want me to start, I can. Can I just ask a question? So if anyone wanted to send question, is it like Zoom that I would be notified that there are questions here or no?
Yeah,
I think so. Yes.
Yeah,
yes,
I think
I found it actually. Okay.
People can also raise their hands, right? Like there's the hand.
Okay, got it.
Okay.
Someone raised a hand. Who raised
That's
a hand?
me. That's
Hi. Okay. So whenever you want me to start, I can definitely do so.
You're ready when you're ready.
Mr. Gorji?
Excuse me?
Should I start?
Yeah, we can start, yes.
No problem. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the fourth session that we are having about the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and why it should be designated as a listed terrorist entity under the Criminal Code of Canada. My name is Sara Akrami. I'm an Iranian Canadian author and translator, and today I am very honored to moderate such an important event with the presence of the Honorable Leo Kousakos, conservative member of the Senate of Canada, and our other respected guest speakers that I will introduce later on. Without any further ado, I am going to start with the Honorable Kousakos. And the question is, Your Honor, why do you think that IRGC is detrimental to Canada's national safety and security? And why should the Canadian government designate such organization in its terrorist list? Time is yours, Your Honor.
Thank you, and I can go on for a couple of hours on this subject matter, but I will be very succinct and clear and transparent. We are a country that's been built on the principle of democracy, freedom, rule of law, and respect for human rights. And if there are any regimes right now in the world that are nothing more than dictators and tyrants that don't respect any one of our fundamental values, it is the IRGC and it is the current regime in Iran. So it's very disturbing that right now we've had a government over the last few years led by Justin Trudeau that seems to embrace these tyrants, embrace this regime, want to dialogue with them. Meantime, he goes about in Canada articulating how we defend human rights, we defend freedom and democracy and the rule of law. But yet, after this terrible incident that happened, of course, in January of 2020, just a few weeks later, I think it was on St. Valentine's Day, believe it or not, of all days, that Justin Trudeau and our foreign minister were at a multilateral conference, and they meet the foreign minister of Iran and kowtow before him and give him the honor and dignity of an exchange and a bilateral meeting, which was offensive not only to the many dozens of Canadian victims of that murder in January of 2020, but offensive to all Canadians, because all of us, irregardless of our ethnic background, we've come to this country as children of immigrants or immigrants, and we're all immigrants in Canada as an extension. For what? For freedom, for an opportunity, for equality, to build the society we have, to express ourselves freely. And I can go on and on. But that's why I think our government has to list the IRGC as a terrorist organization, and our government has to follow the principled foreign policy position of the previous Harper government that made it clear, if you're going to be a tyrant, if you're going to be undemocratic, if you're going to brutally abuse your own people, your neighborhood, and the world, there's consequences for it.
Thank you so much, the Honorable Leo Kousakos, conservative member of the Senate of Canada. Our next speaker is Ms. Avideh Motmaenfar, Avideh is a Belgian Canadian citizen of Iranian descent. She's an internationally renowned osteopath practicing and owner of prestigious clinics in Toronto, New York, and Europe. She holds Doctorate of Osteopathic Medicine degree since 2000 from Belgian School of Osteopathy. She has also studied at the École de Journalisme at the Free University of Brussels and is a graduate of the Art Institute of Toronto in animation and fine arts. As a freelance journalist, she has published articles on National Post, Toronto Sun, Gatestone Institute, Tablet Magazine, The Times of Israel, and Kayhan London on the subject of human rights with respect to Iran. She has recently published her first translated book named Terror in the Name of God. She is the founder and president of the Council of Iranian Canadians, which has been advocating for listing of IRGC in Canada. Avideh participated in a press conference in Ottawa along with the Jewish leaders on January 2020 after the downing of flight PS752, putting the government under notice to carry on with the implementation of Motion 754, which was initiated in the House of Commons in 2018 by the Honorable Garnet Janice. So, Avideh, how will designation of IRGC as a listed terrorist entity will be beneficial for the Iranian community, especially those who are the victims of the Islamic Republic government? Time is yours, Miss.
Thank you very much, Sara, and hello, everyone. It's an honor to be on this panel with such amazing guests. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me, and I would like to take this moment and offer my deepest sympathy to the families of the victim of the flight 752. I'm deeply sorry for all your losses, and your losses are Canada's losses. And I salute the courage you have all shown since this tragedy, and salute your dedication in seeking justice for your loved ones. I am seriously appalled that it's been a year and a half since the tragedy of the flight 752, and still there is no justice. Of course, even before the IRGC fired the missiles that downed the aircraft, killing 176 innocent people, they were already much to mourn. The slaughter of innocents in Iran by the IRGC has a long history dating back to the organization's inception in 1979. And unfortunately, the history of the Islamic Republic and its executive arm, IRGC, is full of atrocities. The principal objective of the IRGC is to fuel and fund terrorism since 1979. The IRGC has been a serious public security threat throughout the Middle East and around the world. And with the support of the Iranian government, it has been responsible for sponsoring, orchestrating, and carrying on many deadly terror attacks on foreign soil, from the bombing of the Jewish Community Center in Argentina to the killing of hundreds of American servicemen and civilians in Iraq, to the siege of the American embassy in Baghdad, to conducting terrorist plots in Germany, France, and Belgium, just to name a few. And as you might know, on January 13, 2020, only 5 days after the IRGC downed the passenger plane, along with B'nai B'rith Canada, the Council of Iranian Canadians made a renewed appeal to the Canadian government to list Iran's IRGC as a terrorist entity in Canada, because our concerns were pragmatic, they were moral and urgent. And as we all know, more than a year and a half prior to the downing of the flight, a motion to list the IRGC was put forward by MP Garnet Janice in the House of Commons, and it passed with overwhelmingly bipartisan support. And at that time, the public safety minister of Goodale confirmed that the process to outlaw the IRGC would proceed. Much to our frustration now, this terrorist organization has still not been designated as such. And this became even more important following the recent horrific downing of the Ukrainian flight. But the Canadian government hasn't provided any explanation for its failure to follow through with the listing, and which is totally contrary to the clearly expressed will of Parliament. But it is worth highlighting that there is a dangerous discordance that exists in current Canadian policy, because in 2012, the government put the IRGC Quds Force, which was run by Qasem Soleimani, on the terror watch list, but not the IRGC in its entirety. And IRGC is controlling Quds Force. So today, IRGC can still operate freely in Canada and can be funded by Canadians through commercial transactions with Canadian companies, as well as personal donations that can go to this organization that will be put forward to oppress Iranian people or fund more terror in the Middle East and in the world. So put in plain words, this strange legal loophole allows individuals and groups in Canada to provide funding to the IRGC, which in return can buy and supply weapons to other terror organizations. So there is definitely a pressing legal reason for listing the IRGC as a terrorist organization, because by doing so, we allow Canadians to sue the Iranian government and seize assets through the use of the Justice for Victims of Terrorism Act. Because right now, if a terrorist act is committed only by IRGC and not by Quds Force, a suit is not possible at this time in Canada. So that is extremely pressing to be done. And to those who always argue that listing IRGC is going to impede Canadian efforts to cooperate and to get answers for the transparent and credible investigation with the Iranian regime on the Ukrainian flight tragedy. I should say that this experience shows that this is very unlikely, because when Canada had full diplomatic relations with Iran, there was no recourse for the horrific rape, torture, and murder of the Canadian journalist Zahra Kazemi in 2003. And to this date, the Kazemi family is still waiting for her body to be repatriated to Canada. So I don't know what else the Iranian regime must do and what Justin Trudeau is waiting for to understand that the Iranian regime is not a trustworthy partner, nor has it ever been. Because to protect its hold on power, the regime consistently lies, cheats, and rationalizes their nefarious actions. We have seen that in their attempts to cover up their role in downing of the flight 752. And if it wasn't only because of international outrage and scrutiny that it finally admitted the truth, otherwise they would have continued to lie to this date. So expecting cooperation from Iran is naive. And there is supporting evidence that the downing of Airline Air was deliberate. The reckless indifference to human life that was so graphically illustrated over the skies of Tehran that day was not, in fact, a one-off. The horrifying event is just one more atrocity to add to the list of crimes and that has been growing since 1979. And the regime surrounding the Ayatollahs has changed little in the quarter century. If any, it has become bolder, and the nations in the West are still dealing with Iran with half measures and sanctions, and the IRGC continues in the meanwhile to funnel money and weapons to other terrorist organizations with impunity. The Iranian dictatorship has murdered thousands of Syrians, and Soleimani himself, as the head of the Quds force, was a lead player in sending and directing the IRGC forces to support the blood-soaked reign of the Syrian dictator. So there is folly in turning a blind eye to what is happening. Targeting IRGC is the fastest way to protect Iranians and send a clear message that Canada does not condone terror, and nor it does cower in the face of terrorist states. Non-state terror organizations like ISIS or Al-Qaeda, they're easy to denounce because they claim credit for their actions. They are open in their hatred of the Western culture, but the Islamic Republic of Iran has employed a duplicitous strategy for 42 years now. They want to maintain their access to trade and have a seat at the international table, and all by denying its actions and working through proxy organizations. So Canada no longer abide by this charade, and it is still and has been, frankly, time for nearly half a century for Canada to add the IRGC in its entirety to its list of foreign terrorist organizations. And until then, I'm afraid to say that we are complicit in their murderous activities. Previous administrations under previous prime ministers in Canada, they have acted severely to the Islamic Republic actions of killing and imprisoning Canadian citizens. I would like Justin Trudeau to come up and say how many more casualties he needs, how many more Canadian lives must be destroyed for the Prime Minister to come up and finally say enough is enough to the criminal regime of Iran and its IRGC. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Ms. Avideh Motmaenfar, for being here today. And how did you feel that when the Trudeau government designated Proud Boys within a week as a listed terrorist entity and not the IRGC after so many years?
I am frankly appalled every single day by what Trudeau government does in the face of dictatorial regimes, and bowing to them and shake hands, and then it was so easy. They showed that it is easy and it is possible to list a terrorist organization very quickly. It's just we need to just act on something that is there, and why it has been taking 3 years, and after all these tragedies and all these crimes, one after another, I don't know what Trudeau is waiting for. I don't know. It is appalling, and I am sometimes feeling so sorry that our government is not, standing up to Canadian values and everything that this country has ever stood up for.
Thank you so much, Ms. Avideh. Our next speaker is Mr. Ali Gorji, who lost his niece on flight PS752. Mr. Gorji, as someone who lost his niece on flight PS752, please tell us your thoughts about Canada's recent forensic report. We cannot hear your voice, sir. Yes, now we can.
Okay. So actually, we have the same pattern, the way the government of Canada treats the PS752 case and the IRGC case. Closely, I'm involved in PS752 tragedy. From the beginning, I had a meeting with Mr. Trudeau. Before any investigation, Mr. Trudeau believed that that was a mistake by Iranian, and that was a fault of Americans. And the liberals, they were consistent with that. And the report we see released a few days ago, again, that confirms they believe, not the reality. 2 weeks after the tragedy, we launched a lawsuit in Ontario Court, Superior Court, using the amendment to the State Immunity Act to sue the Iranian regime. Normally, it should be served by the Foreign Affairs Minister or Deputy of Foreign Affairs to the Iranian regime, government, and it takes normally 1 or 2 weeks. But in our case, it took 8 months. And over pressure on the government, they did that. And so that was obvious for myself personally, that the Liberal government of Canada, they have no willingness to take serious measures against the Islamic regime, or in this case, they want just to end up with compensation. And unfortunately, they manipulated the association of the families with just they talk and they promise without any doing. Finally, we see that in this report, the way they present it, because actually there is no new information. All information they got, they already publicly available. Just they concluded, and the way they concluded from the evidence, I don't want to go to the details because it's too much complicated. But they concluded from the evidence information that that was a mistake. Practically, they said that, okay? And they found no evidence that that was a planned action. It's not at all the case. Even based on their information in the reports, we cannot conclude that. We cannot say that it was planned or not. They don't have information of black box. They don't have a lot of information. The regime, Islamic regime, they didn't collaborate. And that what we see is obviously a political actually biased decision and conclusion, because they have some sympathy. I don't know why, that's the big question with the Islamic regime. And we see as a pattern, the same as in the case of listing IRGC as a terrorist organization. All of you talked about that. And this, we don't understand this resistance of the liberal government, because now it's a resistance, because the motion passed, the IRGC shut down the airplanes, and a lot of evidence, but they resist to list the IRGC as a terrorist organization. Combining all of them, what we see is, first of all, the liberal government of Canada, in relationship with the Islamic regime, they compromise, as Mr. Kousakos said, they compromise the basic value of the Canadian. They compromise the security of the Canadians, because Islamic regime agents or IRGC, because you know, Islamic regime and IRGC, practically they are the same. They are inseparable. their agents, supporters, lobbyists, they are in Canada, they are doing lobbyists, they do money laundering, they are investing heavily in different area, in politics, in economic, and so they compromise the security of the Canadian because they are present here. And you know, the regime by nature, they are criminal. By nature, that's part of their nature, their ideology. So whatever they are dangerous. The third is a foreign influence. As a foreign influence in Canada, with the money laundering, heavy money laundering. We are talking about heavy money, huge money laundering they do. We have information, and everybody knows that whatever the dirty money goes, they can buy the politician, they can affect everywhere. And what they are doing, we know that, for example, Mr. Johari is a MP, liberal MP, is very well known. Is the strong connection with the Islamic regime. We know that because we try to understand, because we ask the question why liberals they do that in conjunction with the Islamic regime, and we try to understand because it's not normal. This resistance it's not at all normal. So there is something seriously, and what we think about that there is a corrupted connection between Islamic regime and some of liberals. Well, what we think was, because I'm a little bit more pragmatist. So what I think now, because I lost my trust totally to liberals, liberal government of the Canada. So I think one of the things I seriously working on that through the justice system, because I trust the justice system of Canada. And I'm planning to sue the government of Canada for mismanagement and obstruction of justice in the case of PS752. And oblige the government to take the case to the International Court of Justice. Second, I'm planning to launch a lawsuit against the government of Canada to list IRGC as a terrorist organization. I know there is already a lawsuit by Benoît Beretz in this topic, and I'm looking at to see how we can launch our lawsuit or to join to that, because I understand there is no way to change the situation but through the justice system. There's no political solution, unfortunately. Unless the Conservative Party is in power, we hope so, but we need to see what happens in the future. But now I'm thinking about using the justice system. The second, I asked Mr. Kousakos as a solution if there is any chance to bring a bill to the Senate or to the House of Commons regarding the IRGC or taking the case of PS752 to the International Court of Justice. The third solution I'm thinking about through the intelligence community. There is very great chance that Islamic regime corrupted some of key liberal politicians in Canada. That's very strong. How we can do through the intelligence community to figure out what's going on, because it's a very, very big issue for the country. Thank you for listening to me, and thank you again for Mr. Avideh, Mr. Kousakos, Mr. Masjoody, and Sara for joining us in this meeting.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ali Gorji. I just wanted to touch upon something. It's just my own personal opinion. I'm not justifying um, any murder. I'm just saying that it's really interesting that when I watch CBC and other mainstream media, when, for example, I'm not saying it's justified that 4 people got killed recently. No one should get killed. They talk about that. They pass bills, Islamophobia bills and everything, but when it comes to whatever that is related to violations of human rights by the Islamic Republic of Iran, they don't want to talk about that. And it's just so heartbreaking that they would designate the Proud Boys as a terrorist entity within a couple of days, and they would pass Islamophobia, the so-called Islamophobia bills, so quickly. But when it comes to this massive record of terrorism and violations of human rights by IRGC, the liberals don't do anything. So it's just the liberal leftist virus. I think it's as dangerous as the China virus, in my opinion, just my own opinion. So we are moving to our final speaker. Mr. Masood Masjoody is a pro-democracy activist and freedom fighter. He obtained his PhD in mathematics from Simon Fraser University, where he became an instructor. He is currently an independent mathematician and a member of Iran Novin organization. Masood, why do you think that Canada should designate IRGC as a listed terrorist entity, especially after downing of flight PS752? Time is yours, sir.
Thank you very much, Sara. It's a great honor to be on this panel. Regarding your question, I think the other panelists basically laid down all the general reasons why IRGC should be designated as a terrorist organization. I would summarize it as follows: because it is a terrorist organization. It commits acts of terror throughout the world, not only in Iran or in the Middle East. Look what they have done, for example, in Latin America. So, for example, in Venezuela, they have a branch of Hezbollah, you know. But what I'm going to talk about, you know, the undesirable presence of tyrannical regimes in Canada have many different forms, such as money laundering, efforts to corrupt political environment by buying influence, and scientific and technological espionage. And I would like to emphasize the latter, paying special attention to the mullahs regime in Iran, because so whatever we can say about the Islamic regime also holds for the IRGC, because they are inseparable. They are basically the same entity. You know, it's been said that the most significant security threats in Canada come out of Communist China, Russia, and the regime in Iran. But among the three, only it's the Iranian regime which has been designated as state supporter of terrorism. And only the Iranian regime cannot have an embassy in here, because it's been seen as a threat to the national security of Canada. However, there is a combination of ignorance in certain public sectors of the threat posed by the Khamenei regime, and also we need to consider the significant amount of blood money laundered into Canadian economy by the regime's affiliates. And so add to the list the unwillingness of the government of Canada to take any action against the regime in Iran. Actually, it seems that the government of Canada, I mean the Liberal government, misses no opportunity to appease the regime in Iran. For example, when it comes to the downing of flight PS752, so one of the Liberal MPs said that, you know, it's hard to basically investigate this situation because we don't have diplomatic relationships. So the Liberal Party is basically using the obvious state act of terror, downing of flight PS752, to bring up their basically willingness to reopen the regime's embassy in Canada. So, you know, a combination of these factors poses a huge threat to the national security of Canada, because when the government is so ignorant, so what can you expect from, for example, academic institutions? You know, Canada has become a safe haven for not only supporters and sympathizers, but also for the very agents and operatives of the regime in Iran. Indeed, that's why I want to seize this opportunity to express my deepest concerns regarding the infiltration of the regime's agents in our academic institutions, and in a fashion that Canadian resources are being used today to support and advance the regime's malicious activities in such serious areas as the ballistic missile program. You know, in Iran Novin, we are focused on gathering information about the agents of the regime in Iran and delivering them to the appropriate institutions such as the RCMP and CSIS. But the thing is that CSIS can only make recommendations to the government of Canada, right? So if the government is not willing to take action, it seems to be a blockage here. But another thing that we can do is to raise public awareness. And sometimes we are put in a situation that we have no choice but to go public on certain agents of the regime in Iran. And so some of you know that. So I have personally experienced this situation when I revealed the presence of a very important figure, expert in the ballistic missile program of the regime in Iran, in a Canadian academic institutions, namely Simon Fraser University, and as a result of that, I was persecuted by the university administration. That's why probably in your introduction, so you correctly said that I used to be a university instructor, but now I'm an independent mathematician. But actually, as Ali said, I think the best measure that we can use is to use the justice system, because I'm not saying that the justice system is perfect, but it can be said that it is the hardest to get corrupted by, for example, lobbyists of the regime in Canada. And so just to present an example, I don't know if I can share my screen about a specific agent of the regime in Iran. Let me
try, Masood. I'm not very familiar with, but try this option for screen share. Okay, you can do that.
So this is the very person who came to Simon Fraser University, and as a visiting professor, he was there for 1 year. So just look at the positions that he had inside of Iran. He participated in 444-day occupation of the U.S. Embassy in Tehran following its seizure on November 4th. Participated in the Cultural Revolution in 1980, leading to the shutting down of all universities and colleges for at least 2 years, as a result of which actually many university students and professors were fired, imprisoned, and even killed by the regime. And also, he joined the Defense Industries Organization after his participation in the Cultural Revolution, and he still works. He continues to work with that entity. And then he became the president of Shiraz University of Technology in Iran, which is the one and only major research partner of the Defense Industries Organization. And he, maybe most importantly, he's a researcher at Iran Space Research Center, which has been sanctioned by the US government because of its involvement in the ballistic missile program of the regime in Iran. I don't know how can I stop sharing this, but
what is the name of that professor?
It's Shahrukh Jam. If you basically Google Shahrukh Jam, IRGC, together with IRGC, you will see basically this post. I have set up a website, and I'm planning to put more and more information about that. And that was not the only person. Actually, I found a network of the agents of the regime in Iran. Some of them are close affiliates of Ebrahim Raisi, nicknamed as Abram the Murderer by Iranians, who is becoming the next Islamic president of the regime in Iran. So I think so it's very important for the government of Canada to basically add the IRGC in its entirety to the list of terrorist entities, not only because Canada, as a democratic country, has a duty to support freedom fighters throughout the world, but also for the national security of Canada. And I think so we can take several paths, including going to intelligence organizations, particularly CSIS, going public and certain agents of the regime, and maybe most importantly, going to the justice system, because that's to me the most reliable institution in Canada. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Masood, Masjoody, joining us from Vancouver. We are moving on to the question Q&A session. The first question is from the Honorable Leo Kousakos, and the question is, why didn't the conservative government of Canada designate the entire IRGC as a terrorist entity in 2012? I think we cannot hear you. Sorry.
Sorry about that, the famous line. The truth of the matter is, as principled as Mr. Harper and Mr. Baird and all of the cabinet was at the time that was dealing with foreign affairs issues, and again, I don't want to speak for the ministers and the government at the time, but my understanding, and I've lived it now as a parliamentarian and as a senator, Global Affairs Canada is very, very reticent in calling out Iran. They're very reticent in calling out the egregious behavior of China, to the point that many of my friends on this panel made in regards to our questioning of why this liberal government is so willing to tolerate and appease the IRGC. The real question I have as a parliamentarian, which is even more profound, why is Global Affairs so willing to tolerate the intolerable? And back to the point that many of my friends made, and I'll be blunt. I really feel that Global Affairs Canada has been infiltrated, as have many of our academic institutions in Canada, as many of our political and business institutions have been in Canada. It is a very profound problem we have. Canada has become a safe haven, and I think Mr. Masood alluded to it, for people who do very bad things under the veil of various regimes around the world, and they come to Canada and they buy their mansions. They speculate in our real estate. They use a lot of entities in Canada to launder money, and that's a reality. The Chinese Communist regime does it. The IRGC does it. Regimes like the Erdogan regime in Turkey do it. Smaller entities, there's some people walking around here in Montreal who have done some very egregious things in Haiti to their own people. It should be things designated as crimes against humanity, and they're buying real estate here, and we all know they're using real estate to launder money, to launder dirty regime money from around the world. Mr. Trudeau and our government continues to turn a blind eye, and what has come of it? Yeah, there's been some capital that has come to Canada as a result of it, but it's also making young Canadians, law-abiding Canadian citizens, pushing them right out of the market in this country. They can't even buy first homes because they can't afford them. So the problem is cancerous and it's growing. And if you don't cut that cancer at its root, it spreads into other areas of society. So I'm disappointed that in the window of 2-3 years, we couldn't do it. I think if Mr. Harper was on this call, he will tell you that there was a lot of pushback from Global Affairs Canada and our bureaucracy. And it's the same bureaucracy today that while we have Canadians detained illegally in China, they want to have cocktail parties and organize events for Canada-China Business Council. While we're getting Canadian citizens who are being murdered by a regime that tried to cover up the bombing of Flight 752, I remember the first few hours and days, the Iranian government saying, well, it was a malfunction, mechanical malfunction, right? The engine burned and it crashed. It was a pilot error. No, don't believe American intelligence. They're worried about Boeing stock. And our Canadian government, and again, I think a number of our speakers today alluded to it, they perpetuated that narrative. Oh, this is somehow the Americans to blame. No, it wasn't the Americans that shot down a commercial flight made up of Iranian citizens and Ukrainian citizens and our citizens. It was a regime that not only did it, and they did what we abhor in our democracies. They did it in a way where there was no accountability, no transparency after the fact. And when any entity who conducts action of this nature and isn't accountable and transparent, it insults the memory of all these human beings, mothers, husbands, fathers, sisters, nieces that we've lost in this tragedy.
Thank you so much, Your Honor. The next question is for Ms. Avideh, and the question is, as you know, Raisi will be the next president of the Islamic Republic of Iran. And do you think that there is a possibility for the Canadian government, especially the liberals, to start a dialogue or diplomatic relations with the regime and open the embassy, or you do not see a chance? What's your take on that?
I believe that the liberals would definitely attempt to open dialogue, and there is this folly of wanting to dialogue and talk with terrorists. And I have always responded to that. I have written an article actually about the history of relations of Canada and Iran since 1954 until now, since the very first time that Canada started having diplomatic relations with Iran under the previous imperial dynasty of Pahlavi. And everything was very good until the revolution of 1979. And then since 1979, there has been only a very, very narrow window of opportunity that they tried to have some kind of relations, and that was definitely ruined by the killing of Zahra Kazemi, where Canada had to severe contacts and ties with Iran and call back our ambassador. And since there has been no, there was a embassy open, but it was not acting as an embassy because there was no ambassador. There was only a chargé d'affaires, and that chargé d'affaires was also an IRGC member who had climbed over the walls of the American embassy. So there, I would answer that question that definitely the liberals have this disease of that they would like to open relations with Iran. They think that it's through dialogue that you can better the relations, but this is not likely. They would spend Canada's resources, money, time, and efforts for nothing. That would not lead to anything, because terrorists have always wanted what they want, and if they don't get what they want, they're gonna create a chaos somewhere else and threaten, their interlocutors, and is not going to end and go anywhere, as they started to do that when Trudeau took office. Trudeau came to office by basically promising the supporters and the agents and operatives of Iran that he will reopen Iranian embassy here and Canada's embassy in Iran, but very quickly they were disillusioned by their efforts. So the efforts will be definitely there because, as I said, it's a disease. But I'm sure that it will not proceed to anywhere because with the Iranian regime, it is simple. Like history has shown that whenever there was a serious resistance to their terrorist activities, and they have been called out on their terrorist activities, they have tried to bring a moderate figure forward because they want a seat on the international trade, and they want to be in a relation with other countries, but they don't want to admit that they are terrorists. So they bring a so-called moderate forward. But since Biden administration is so willing to give them whatever they want, they don't have to hide anymore under that kind of mask, and they have brought Raisi to become president, a criminal who has at least given the order and conducted the murder of at least thousands of political prisoners during the summer of 1988. That's the least that we know that he has done, and it's public knowledge. So they don't even hide that. A criminal becomes president of a country, and so I don't even know what Canada needs more to stop this kind of attempt to and call out Iran as a terrorist regime and its IRGC as its executive arm.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Avideh. The next question is for Masood. You were talking about infiltration of the regime within the politicians. We know one figure is Majid Johari from writing of Richmond Hill. I'm sure you know better than me that he recently signed it was a letter that he supported the so-called Palestinian violations of human rights, but he has never written or casted his voice about violations of human rights in Iran. How can us, the Iranian community in diaspora, raise awareness regarding these issues, despite the fact that we do not have access to mainstream media? We do not have any voice in mainstream media.
I think we need to basically get in touch with alternative media, so basically mainstream media is on the side of tyrannical regimes, and so there is no independent reporting within mainstream media. So I think even in social media, it's kind of hard because of censorship by Twitter and Facebook, and that will be get even harsher when the Liberal government of Canada wants to control what Canadians can see or post on social media, according to as per Bill C-10. I think we need to get united on the issue of revealing the presence of the operatives of the regime in Canada, because whether we are leftist or the rightist, we have a big problem. So our homeland has been occupied for more than 42 years. And so the main question to the Iranian diaspora is to free our motherland. So I think the regime in Iran is the very reason we should be united and focus on at least shaming the operatives of the regime, and if there is an opportunity to take them to the court and invoke the justice system. But it's really hard. It's really hard. And I just want to add one more thing in response to the previous question that Avideh perfectly answered. I think, yes, there is a high probability that the Liberal government will engage with Raisi, because they are very good at ignoring the parliamentary motions. It was in what year? So 1988 massacre has been recognized by the Parliament of Canada as a crime against humanity. And, Raisi is responsible for many of the lives taken as a result of 1988 massacre. So I think that's another reason why I think, the Liberal government will be encouraged to engage with Raisi.
Thank you so much. I wanted to thank the Honorable Leo Kousakos for being here today, Ms. Avideh Motmaenfar, Mr. Masood Masjoody, and Mr. Ali Gorji for organizing this event. Thank you so much, everyone, and we look forward to see you in the near future in our next event. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.